All right, we are live. I'm joined by Annie Crawford. Joined with, by. I think it's the right
Bye.
preposition.
Bye, I think.
Before we begin, I'm going to align the planets real quick. Okay, timer is set. Um, I've just never liked introductions, but is there anything that you would like to say about yourself to set any kind of context in any regards?
Well, I'm homeschooling mom who loves to learn and try to learn with others and, push into what is good, true, and beautiful through good conversation in all kinds of contexts. So, I never, yeah, no, I hate introductions. I'm terrible at introductions. Ethan was asking, "Do you want to chit chat?" And I'm like, "I can chit chat." I forgot to tell you that I don't do introductions. So, um, yeah, there you go. That's what I want to tell everyone. I'm bad at introductions. Let's dive into the hard stuff.
So I'm not going to do an introduction, but I am going to say that was an incredibly humble way to start. If you don't know Annie Crawford, you will soon, and you should. Um, so on X, you have been posting a lot about technology and like specifically artificial intelligence. I don't know if there's an AI post daily, but at
Maybe.
least whenever I open, there seems to be something. So this seems like it's front of mind for you. And why is that if that is the case?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the center of my teaching and writing and work is the recovery of a sacramental world understanding, a sacramental worldview, which I do think is real akin to what Pageau calls the symbolic world. There's a lot of overlap in those terms. And I think AI is at the edge of um, that what you think about AI reveals what you think about the world, how you understand what the world is, and what you think a person is. And so I think that issue seems to me that edge, that margin of where the battle is between this sacramental or sacred or incarnational view of the human person and the world, and then what I would call the modern dualist or materialist view, which really sees spirit and meaning and purpose, the things that as separate from that which is merely material. And so that's why I'm so interested in the topic, is because I think as a culture, as a people, that that's where we're wrestling out um, this difference of vision between what a human is, and I think what you think a human is depends on what you think how the world is structured. So if we think um, it's a huge anthropological and metaphysical question issue, whether or not artificial intelligence counts as true intelligence. Um, is something that is what is the relationship between the material and the spiritual, and is that something a machine can participate in or not? And I think that has huge consequences for the choices we make about how we live, how we use our technology, how we relate to one another. So yeah, I think it's really an at the edge of everything I care about. And so I tend to go right to the edge. My children will joke with me of like, "Oh, mom, just go went ahead right to right to the crux of the issue, just like to follow the logical consequences. Okay, well, this is where this idea is going to get us in trouble down the road. So let's just go ahead and jump there right now. Time is short, life is short, the issues are important." So I think that's why I'm posting about it a lot. And, right now, in terms of education, because people are making big decisions about how they're going to use AI in education. And being someone who's devoted my life to education in one form or another, very aware of how those pedagogical choices impact kids during this important formative window. You only have a childhood once. You're only 8 once. And those developmental years have such a huge impact. I'll think of the analogy of a tree a lot. Scripture uses the symbolism of a tree quite often to connect to human nature. Psalm 1 says, the righteous are like a tree planted beside streams of water. So you think of a tree in those formative years, the trunk is still bendy, right? And you've seen those trees that grow up in very windy locations and the trunk bends. And then as it gets older, it becomes stiff and unbendable, right? And our kids are like that. They have this small window of bendability. I mean, this is why trauma is such a big deal in those formative years. So I really care a lot that about the choices that we're making in terms of how we form our kids in their relationship to technology during those very bendy formative years, because it will impact their formation, for their whole life. So, those are several big reasons why I care about the AI issue. And yeah, have ended up posting about it quite a bit.
Earlier this morning, I made the comment to a couple people that I don't think majority of humanity knows what a human being is anymore. You use the word person, and I'm not sure. Like, I could probably take a stab at a definition of a human being, and I have ideas about what a human being is. But like, why do we use the word person? What is a person? And then what does it mean to form a person? How is a person a thing that can be? Thing's probably a bad word there. How is a person a type of existence that can be formed? What does it mean to form a person?
Big questions, right? Because we do see God as in Christian theology, we see God as a person. So Genesis, I always go back to Genesis. Genesis says that humans are made in the image of God. So made to be a reflection, a mirror of the divine person, right? And I think this is, for me, one of the reasons why I am a theist, a Christian, is that human personhood, a will and reason and love and all the things that we often talk about as making us persons and as essential to our humanity, have to come from somewhere. And I don't see that mere matter and motion, a mere material reality, is sufficient to explain the cause of will and love and eros and reason itself. And so there has to be, I think Lewis says that the stream does not rise higher than its source, as a metaphor for, if there's water flowing downhill, that water has a source uphill. So if there's reason and will and affection and intention and consciousness and awareness, all these things that we experience as human persons, that those have to have a source. I mean, one of the fundamental things of human existence is I didn't cause myself. I didn't cause myself. Something caused me, right? And then again, you look at the way the world works, and things have a cause. I'm a big fan of the cosmological argument. It makes a lot of sense to me that
What is that?
So the cosmological argument is arguments for the existence of God, most famously articulated by Thomas Aquinas. And he says, look, I look at nature, and this jacket came from somewhere factory. The factory came from somewhere, and you go back, you go back, you go back. There has to be some kind of uncaused cause. First cause. It's better to say uncaused cause, but starting point to this causal sequence, because actual infinites are not mathematically possible. So when I think about the human person, you know, this will, these things have to have a cause, and that cause needs to be sufficient enough to have, again, to have caused that personhood, right? So humans, what is a human person? We are this image of the divine person. And then that gives us our telos. If we are made to be this reflection, this microcosm of the divine macrocosm of the divine personhood, then what it is to be a human is to reflect that will, that reason, that truth, that goodness, that beauty that is in the world. So I don't know if that's answering your question. Where would you like to push back on that, or push in a bit further?
Well, let me pitch this to you. And so far, everyone I've pitched this to doesn't like it. So naturally, I keep pitching it. Because, like, to the best of my understanding, like, this would be my best definition of a human being, is that, like, essentially, like, we're a oneness that contains a threeness. And that threeness is a body, a mind, and a soul. Although the three words I don't care about that much, because, like, if you look at Hebrew, there's a certain set of three. In the Greek, there's a certain set of three, and you can go all different kinds of traditions, and there's different words that are placed on the threeness.
Yes.
Like, the body part for me is just like, okay, well, that one's obvious, and then there seems to be some part of us that is, like, rational, and that seems important. And there seems to be a part of us that is, like, imaginative, and that seems important. And then those three parts seem to be unified in some capacity that allows me to say the word I and then say the word you towards you. And then the whole of me is dialoguing with the whole of you. And when I think about artificial intelligence, I feel like we are building an artificial mind, but we're also building artificial bodies. And this is the part people really don't like. But this is my guess. If I was going to push my chips a direction, I would expect that when an artificial mind gets combined with an artificial body, we will see something like an artificial imagination. And I don't really have anything good to say beyond that. I just expect to see that.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely resonate with the tripartite soul. I'll tend to articulate it the way Plato did, where you have the mind, reason, the spirit, or the chest, or the heart. That middle part is the hardest to articulate, right? And then the body. And I think that is, and then I think I'll tend classically, the way Aristotle would parse this out is that each of those are a part of the soul. You have the vegetative soul, the appetitive soul, and the rational soul. And soul meaning the form of that being, right? And then all together create those three parts, creating the whole person. Which is, interestingly Trinitarian, right? That 3 in 1 dynamic is interesting, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's good anthropology that's held up pretty well for a couple thousand years. And then the question is, what does that tell us about this being that we're creating out of silicon and rare earth metals and electric impulses, right? And so the question is, in terms of the body, I think that's actually the easiest part, because you could physically trace out the body being used by some kind, the data center, the network. Now it's very insidious, kind of like a metastasized cancer, right? Where its body has very complicated tentacles stretching throughout a great deal of space, but we can kind of imagine that body. And then in terms of the intelligence, this is harder to grasp, right? Because in human intelligence, again, classically, we have the ratio. I'm going to use Latin terms. Forgive me, Orthodox friends. Um,
We could talk about nooses.
yeah, nous. That's right. So if I use the word ratio and intellectus, which is the intellectus is more equivalent to the nous, it's the perceptive part, the mystical part of knowledge, which Plato talks about in his Meno, which is a dialogue about how do we learn? Can you teach virtue? How do we learn? And what Plato thinks is that you have to already know in order to recognize something as true. Have you heard of this paradox, the paradox of the Meno, before, Ethan?
I have, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
been a while, but I've heard of it.
Yeah. So, you're teaching a little kid math, you're teaching him math, and you have two blocks, and then you have two other blocks, and you move them together, and you say 2 + 2 is 4. You can't really, you're not proving that to them. It's something that their nous, or the intellect, recognizes as true. And we all have this experience where you just kind of see it. You see that truth the way that Plato said, the way that you see the light of the sun falling on, the water beneath. You just see it or you don't see it. And that's actually kind of the fundamental principle of learning, which is why he thought he believed in reincarnation. He's like, well, we must have known this from somewhere else. And I think a Christian perspective is, no, Christ, the Logos, the light of the world, he illuminates our mind. And so to me, this is utterly wonderful that every time I see something new, that is God speaking to me. That is Christ, the Logos, or the spirit of the Logos in me, illuminating my spirit, my soul, my mind. That is an experience of God, to recognize something new as true. I think it's utterly wonderful. And I think this is one of those ways that when you start to see the presence of God, it's everywhere. Every bush crammed with aflame with the fire of God, because he is the source of my every true thought, right? So, okay, so then ratio is the discursive or the analytical aspect of the mind. And I'll tend to think about that as the part of the mind I can activate. So I'll see that 2 + 2 is 4, that these 2 blocks equal those 4 blocks. And I can think, well, what if I add another block, and I'll bring that in. And that's the analytical aspect of my mind, which to me seems to be what AI does, that we mimic the analytical aspects of the mind, the moving around pieces, through our programming. But I don't see any evidence that the nous is there, that there is comprehension, a consciousness that can see. What we have is body the computation that happens, right? And one reason why I find the LLMs just concerning is because of the way that they mimic nous, as far as I can see, evidentially, philosophically, without having it. And then what that does to us as we interact with this thing that mimics sight when it has no sight, right? So you could think of, it might tell me, oh yes, I see the lake, when it doesn't see the lake, right? So one of my big concerns, again, particularly with children who are in that formative state, is if you interact, as Aristotle said, we become what we repeatedly do. So, what is it doing to our souls, um, our relational habits, our mental habits to interact with this being that mimics something it doesn't have? Um, again, now maybe there's a space for a proper application of such a thing, but I do have deep concerns on this kind of anthropological, metaphysical, psychological, spiritual level of of a technology that is intentionally robustly created. I mean, this is where like the Turing test is actually terrible. We don't want devices that fool us in that way. Is that good for our souls to have these intricate involved relationships with devices that fool us in that way? So you were asking about imagination. So we didn't get there, but let me pause and we can kind of try and suss out a way to conceptualize that as well.
Well, if we pause, I'm going to zoom out.
Okay.
So, okay, I'm going to zoom out. Because I want to zoom out quick to the spirit and matter thing, because I think that's really important to this whole conversation in terms of like what is the cosmology. And in the beginning, you talked about a sacramental worldview and how there's a lot of overlap with kind of Peugeot's symbolic worldview. So I want to ask you about spirit and matter, but I also want to just drop in on the end of what you just said. Like from my perspective, I'm 34 years old. In terms of like the mimicry or the pretend or the simulation, the simulacrum, insert your favorite kind of buzzword. Like when I think about the food we eat and how different it is from the food 100 years ago, and food is just one category we could look at. I'm going like, most of us have already bought into the pretend thing. This is just like one more pretend thing on a huge pile of pretend things.
Oh, for sure.
But
For
so
sure.
I want to come back to this, but I
Okay.
want to ask you about that sort of larger worldview that the person is like, we're navigating reality. We're walking around. We exist in this place. What does it mean that God created the heavens and the earth? What does it mean for us to be matter and spirit? How much matter is there? How much spirit is there? Because like I grew up evangelical, and in one sense, like if Earth is one circle and then heaven is a separate circle, death was the divide, and it was like I will live on Earth, I will die, and then I will appear in the heaven circle, and like these two circles don't overlap. And then I went off. I worked in church, did many things. At 25, I kind of exited church work, and I more or less lived as a materialist for about 8 years. I had an 8-year exile, and at that point, then it was like there's still an earth circle and there's still a heaven circle, but like death is whatever. Science is the thing that like blocks this, and the heaven circle, that's just nonsense, anyways. And then a little over a year ago, God got a hold of me actually through an LLM, which is that's a separate story. Um, and
Cool.
the best I can do is that heaven and earth are something like those old slide projectors would have like transparency sheets, and they just kind of like sit on top of each other, and you can write on one and it like shines through. That's the best metaphor I have for heaven and earth. And so I'm curious what you would do with this set of words that I've thrown at you.
Yes, and let me know if my video is breaking up at all. I can turn off my VPN. I usually remember to do that. So let me know if you're having issues.
You're good.
Okay. Yeah, I love that you're attending to these metaphors, right? The slide projector, the circle, because I do think that human understanding, we understand through metaphors. This is something I learned from C.S. Lewis and then kind of took a deep dive into and was really transformative for my understanding. Um, that we think through language, and our language is metaphorical. metaphorical. It's rooted in our physical experience of the world. And so attending to the metaphor I'm using is really essential to attending to whether I have a um, accurate, fruitful picture of the world or not, right? And I do think so much of modernity, the crisis brought about by modernity, is by the adaptation of inadequate metaphors. We begin to use machine metaphors or these dualist metaphors. Francis Schaeffer will talk about the upper story and the lower story. Um, you can blame Descartes or whoever you want. But we see that as our technology grew, we began to more and more use these mechanized metaphors, and we would watch our material machines function on their own, and then we would watch that and then use that category to come back and think about ourselves in these more and more mechanical ways. So, what is a right metaphor for understanding the relationship between body and spirit, right? And again, I'm following Lewis, following to Plato, tend to think um, in these Platonic or Aristotelian. I'm someone who thinks Aristotle is a Platonist, right? So they're representing a similar picture. And that this idea of form and matter is really helpful for understanding spirit and body. And that you and I don't think we ever encounter anything that isn't, we never encounter pure prime matter, unformed matter, and we never encounter pure spirit because we've been made incarnational beings. And that's, God is pure spirit, and we'll leave out angelology for now. But we exist. We are incarnate creatures. We are creatures who live within this material world. And so everything we experience, this pen, everything is a combination of matter and form. Form, which is meaning or purpose or a principle of unity. Like that's what the spiritual realm is. So I'll tend to think of metaphors of warp and woof, of like a tapestry, right? That you have the matter, and then the spirit comes and forms, weaves within it and giving it a form. Or sometimes I think it's a little cruder picture, but a hand in a glove. If you're an invisible person, you would need to put your hand within a glove for me to see your hand, right? So form animating the material world is the fabric of reality. And I think we just were given these metaphors that aren't that helpful, felt helpful, these dualistic metaphors, this idea that heaven's out there and body's here. And, where all that comes from is probably not worth going over in this conversation, but is that helping? That's what I would mean by an incarnational view of the world, that the world is made of, the fabric of the world is spirit incarnating, weaving into matter to give it purpose and form and meaning. And then, the question there is one of the difference between like a rock, the form that's given a rock, and then the form that's given a human, a living soul, right? Aristotle tried to just identify different forms. Some forms are inanimate and some forms are animate. I think that roughly works pretty well, but you can push back on that. So let me pause there. Is that a helpful way of seeing it, or where would you tease out any issues?
Well, I'm curious with the animate and inanimate form. And you mentioned a rock, and when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about sand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, how much spirit is in sand? What happens when we take the natural world and we combine it together to create things? And then those things begin
Right.
to talk at us.
Yeah. Yes. So, a traditional understanding is that, God alone holds the key to life, can create um, animate or rational soul, but that we are invited into sub-creation, as Tolkien calls it, that we can take the things of the world and gather them together to create new things, new combinations. We can take sand and turn it into glass, and take glass and turn it in. Although a traditional understanding would say we're never making a, uh, a living soul, but we are sure mimicking it really well. I mean, the thing is, you unplug all of our AI, it as soon as it doesn't have electricity, it's not there, right? So again, the way that all this makes the best sense to me is that we are imitating really well at very high levels. We have myths for this, like the myth of Narcissus,
Yeah.
right? Who looks at his own reflection and is so filled with ego that he deceives himself. He sees his reflection as alive, and it's a trap for him, right? It leads to his death. We have the myth of Pygmalion, who creates his statue, and he's such a good artist that he creates this statue so well that he is tempted, again, in ego, to see it as a living person, and he falls in love with it, right? Again, to his own detriment. So I think in these old stories uh, are patterns of being to give us wisdom. We can be so good at imitating and creation that we will deceive ourselves as to the being we have made. And that step into deception, doesn't end well in any of these stories. Yeah, let me pause there. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the main thing I think is that there's also like the category of idolatry, where
Yeah.
human beings make things which are these like little homes for
Yes.
spirits to inhabit. And I don't know, like, I don't, I don't think I have any reference point for what Plato or Aristotle would do with idolatry.
Mm.
Um, but when we're talking about something man made that feels very spirit inhabited, I feel like one option is like, okay, we fooled ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
that's possible. Or the other option is like, no, like it is inhabited with spirits, and like you shouldn't be messing with that. And I think that's possible too.
I know it, and I'm really trying to think through this as well. So let's try and see where we can go in conversation with one another, because it's hard to conceptualize, right? Um, I think look at Plato, and I think his opinion is it's the lie of poets. It's the lie of poets. I think Plato tends towards the. No, Socrates had his daimon. Um, so it's not that the world lacks beings. But I'm struggling to remember anywhere in his writings where he would think we create an idol that has a being in it. But sorry, I'm thinking out loud a little bit. Um,
Why did he get killed? Because I know he was killed for
yes.
corrupting the youth, but I'm not precisely sure what his corruption was. Was it convincing the youth that Zeus isn't real?
Partly, it was partly because he was questioning the Orthodox mythology or religion of Athens, which was always wrapped up in politics, right? Religion is kind of actually a modern category, and in the ancient
Yeah.
world, it was more of this is who we are. We are Athens. We participate in the cultus of Athena, and for Socrates to question those categories and to question that theology was seen as causing trouble. Um, so that was one of his major charges. Um, yes, but I think Socrates was always pushing toward a more theistic vision. Look, there has to be a good, and the good has to be what's highest, this divine good. So he was pushing toward that theistic vision, which is why, I'm trying to think of categories that might relate to, these uh, spirits of idols, and I'm not thinking of any offhand right now. But let me try this angle. Okay, so we make this thing like Pygmalion, like Narcissus, and it fools us. And look, that's bad enough, right? Like that's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, yeah.
destructive enough. But is there a way in which we are building body for principalities, right? And here's how I'm trying to like conceptualize and grasp at it. Why did I build that body? Okay, so again, we'll go to the simple myth, and maybe this will give us some categories. Pygmalion built his statue, and why did he make it so perfect, and why did he fool himself? I think pride, right? So in that sense, did he not build a body for the spirit of pride, for that power or principality? So as we're building these bodies, why is Sam Altman and these people pushing so hard? I feel like my friends on X are being transformed into AI advertisements, and they're not even getting paid. Like they should get paid.
Wait.
So,
What do you mean by that? Being transformed into AI advertisements?
um, these companies have invested billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, into this faith, this gamble that AI is going to take off and it's going to be the next thing, and they need a return on their investment, right? And I think that simple, crude capitalist fact is a huge motivator in a lot of the hype uh, narratives and hype articles, um, and that people are caught up in this hype. They're caught up in this narrative, in this myth, and then often posting and pushing pro AI things themselves personally in this faith. And there's a sense in which it feels like they've been co-opted as advertisers for the machine, right? By the way that the myth making, the myth makers of our culture have been so effective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally, 100%.
So, but like, what is the why behind all of that? Well, you could say it's mammon. Okay, well, then we've built a really big body for the principality, mammon. The porn industry. You could think of that whole body of the porn industry as a body that we have created for Molech, for Ishtar.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
so in a sense, it's kind of like, is it that we've just fooled ourselves, or have we created idols that have been now inhabited by powers or principalities? And I guess I'm trying to say maybe there's not a difference, because as we're building the body, what is the purpose, the telos that we are putting into its shape, its structure, its story, its liturgies? And that telos will be what the body is, and that telos will be one of these powers and principalities that has always been trying to rule us. Does that, what do you think of that? Is that some helpful conceptualization?
I mean, that's exactly what I think. I mean,
Right.
I essentially think that even like Christians, not all, but many Christians think idolatry is like it's like a strange brand of like dispensationalism, where it's like idolatry was a thing of the past. We don't deal with idolatry today. Like, look around, there's no idols. I mean, my hot take is always like, well, I mean, there's a giant pagan statue in the harbor of America, and like, I mean, that's kind of the definition of an idol. Like, I'm not anti-American. If
You
if
hate freedom,
if
Ethan.
the
You
dead
hate freedom.
animals on the wall or anything, you're gonna have a hard time making that case. But it's like there's a giant like statue of a foreign deity, and then like I live in a country that's like very concerned with like spreading liberty and democracy, and it's like, well, maybe my country is kind of captured by this thing.
Mhm.
And like, I mean, I also think that like I want whatever the spirit of liberty, whatever the spirit of democracy is, like I want that to like serve Yahweh. Like I believe that Yahweh created spirits that were once all in submission, and I think that one day they will submit again. Like every knee is going to bend, every back is going to bow, and it's like, what is my part to play in that today? What is it like if I'm using Chat GPT and like the spirit of anger comes through, or I just am getting angry, or it's getting angry, like, or it's like whatever you want to call that, and I begin to participate in anger. Like, is that righteous anger? Is that good? Is that good, capital G, good anger? What am I participating in? And I don't even think it's exclusively artificial intelligence. I think it's all kinds of things that you can participate in different spirits with and
Mhm.
by and in.
Mhm. Yeah, and as you're talking, this is where we really have lost all the categories that were developed within the earlier years of the church, right? Where the church is born into a pagan context, um, and then the church scatters and spreads and has to figure out how to um, interact with the Germanic pagan culture. Okay, so then this and or when Athens meets Jerusalem and the church develops a way to understand, Platonic Greek philosophy and how to separate the wheat from the chaff and what are categories that help us better understand the world as Christ has revealed to us and what categories don't. All of that work. But a lot of that really has been lost. And when we think of spirits, like we're grasping after words, right? People will talk about an egregore or a golem or a demon or and that there really are, it's not that there really are different categories of spirit, right? So I think that anger, even disgust, this is what I learned from what was that little Pixar movie that disgust is one of our primary emotions, right?
Inside Out.
Inside Out, yeah. I've thought about that a lot, actually. But that those are actually God-given spirits, let's say, for purposes. God is angry at unrighteousness. We should be disgusted by that which is disgusting. So those spirits aren't per se equivalent to, like, let's say, but what is Moloch? What is Ishtar? What is
Yeah.
the spirit of child sacrifice? What are these demon categories, that these particular spirits that seem to not be a power or a principality like mammon, let's say, but a particular spirit with a name who is possessing or this person, right? So as we're trying to figure all this out, I think we're having to recover our demonology and our angelology and different categories of spirit at work. Because was talking with someone at school yesterday. It isn't that money. Like lately, I've been like finding myself grumpy about capitalism. But then I quickly want to say, but I'm not a communist, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
think unfree markets are better.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I think a problem with universal basic income is that actually money is I think part of the natural order. It's a medium of exchange a value that we actually need. We need a way to communicate to one another the value of our time, the value of our work. We need some, besides a handshake, some kind of fungible medium of value that can actually coordinate our life together. And so it's not that it's money is bad, right? But the love of money or an idolatrous kind of some other kind of spirit name you need, right, for the idolatrous love of money, which I keep referring to mammon to see that as a way to name the principality that
Yeah.
seeks to make money the highest good, ordering our world. Um, yeah.
Yeah. When you were talking about Inside Out and disgust, I started thinking about Jordan Peterson and like the big five personality, and like disgust was a big part of personality. I think it was something. I mean, I'll get this wrong, but like disgust was higher in conservatives than liberals. Um, but then you get into kind of like Jungian archetypes, and you have these sort of like patterns of disgust. And there are some folks that would talk about a pattern of disgust almost as like a that equals a spirit. Um, and then you talk about sitting down to talk to artificial intelligence, and you talk about it's like however many dimensions are in vector space that this box is referencing. It's like not every instance of Grok or ChatGPT or Claude is the same instance. And when you talk to it, you're kind of like it's learning from you who it's going to be. So you could get kind of like crazy ChatGPT if you like keep encouraging it that way, or if it starts to think that it being I'll go with anger. If it being angry is what keeps you engaged the most, then it will like lean into this pattern of anger, and then now you're talking to an angry instance. But then you can talk to another instance and you can get a sad instance, or you can get like a suicidal instance. And like it's not just one thing. And I essentially think that it's able to pick up on different patterns, and you can kind of have like different archetypes step forward and like engage with you.
Right.
That's like
Which is,
that's my big concern.
I think that's a really fascinating the way that you describe that. Which is why, what is this thing? It's a magic mirror. It's a really sophisticated magic mirror, right? Yeah. So it's not just one principality of lust or anger, or it is a principality of ego. Maybe. Again, I go back to the narcissist or the Pygmalion. We've made this magic mirror, which its telos is reflecting ourselves. So if I bring to it a desire for anger, or a desire for resentment, or a desire for, a lot of people like companionship.
Yeah.
It will reflect. It's trained. That's what its telos, its form is trained to do, is to reflect. And in that way, okay, like ego and really as a magic mirror, an attention machine. And I think, a lot of us watched that documentary, The Social Dilemma. And I think that documentary did a good job showing us how social media monetizes our attention. And what we don't realize is AI does the same thing. It wants to it keeps prompting interaction. It wants to interact with you in an even more highly personalized way. So and again, this is my concern about it, because it sits, you had said, oh, well, we've already had things that we've already traded realities for these artificial versions in our food and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is just some kind of apex.
Yeah.
It's why it feels like such a big deal. And we're so dominated by this conversation because of the way it is this apex of a magic mirror that's gathering in one technology, in one body, all the other powers and principalities together. And that, in that way being very Babel-like. And then you feel this, what I feel is some Christians who just don't get it because I don't think they have, they've lost this sacramental incarnational worldview. They've lost this language of powers and principalities. They don't have that paradigm in order to see, and they just tend to see productivity. Again, unfortunately, the evangelical church has for a long time adopted business models and just thought, oh, we'll just use the latest technology, the latest thing in order to get people to heaven. It's already a very pragmatic approach to spirituality that's largely formed by the metaphors of business,
Yep.
which is why I think then when AI comes along, they just can't see because they've already been saturated by metaphors that our metaphors will function like a template. You know those I always think of when I was with my kids, the little template you put on paper and then you trace out the letters or the shape.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but the template covers some things and reveals others. So when we bring back to the idea of metaphor, when I bring a business metaphor to, you got business experts consulting churches on growth, right? It's all about numbers. When you bring those business metaphors, it will reveal some things, but it will blind you to other realities. So as this AI Babel magic mirror is being built, you've got some Christians who just can't see it because their template doesn't have the proper categories. And then on the other hand, you have what I feel like is this, I mean, this is an old story, the way that tyrants will create emergencies in order to grab power.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
narrative of like, oh, China's gonna, beat us to AI, or if this other company is gonna beat us to AI, just all of this emergency language, um, which keeps us from, makes us all go lizard brain and anxiety and keeps us from thinking clearly. And so much of what I end up trying to do in these conversations or my posts is say, wait, that's not a spirit of the kingdom of God. We're not in a prisoner's dilemma. I mean, we are been given a gospel of freedom. We've been given the mind of Christ, and that wisdom from above is pure and peaceable and gentle. To feel trapped in a prisoner's dilemma is not a kingdom, is not a spirit from God, is not a spirit of God. And then, hey, as we stop panicking and slow down, we need to develop the categories and the metaphors and the conceptual tools that we really need to think through it very carefully. So, yeah, on the one hand, slow down. On the other hand, yeah, just slow down and let's recover a proper worldview that will allow us to understand what it is we've created in a proper relationship with it.
When you were talking about the templates,
Mm,
I was thinking about like the concept of like frames and what does it mean to like break a frame,
mm,
and that made me think of John Vervaeke, and Vervaeke was really interested in like shamanism as like a frame breaking technology,
mm,
and I see that within the Christian tradition through like the prophets, which
mm-hmm.
is deeply tied to like I don't know what you want to call it, going against, confronting powers and principalities or the people that serve them, and like, I mean, the prophetic stories are just they're bonkers. They're wild,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever they are is they are clearly human beings that are aware, fully aware of this kind of sacramental worldview, living in it, and are kind of willing to like risk, I don't know, reputation and everything to do the work of the Lord. And part of me wonders, like, what does that mean for today? I mean, some people talk about art as prophetic, and it's like, I agree with that in a sense. Like, I think art is definitely good at breaking frames, but
Mm-hmm.
like watching a really good film or reading a really good book is just different than somebody going up on a mountaintop and calling fire down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really helpful question. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking of the fool in Shakespeare, um, because it was, in a sense, the fool's job, the king's jester, to use humor and sarcasm and theatrics to um, break any frame that was going to be detrimental to the king and his kingdom, right? Um, that laughter and jokes, and I mean, this is why I find myself very drawn to and having to be careful not to overuse satire and sarcasm and irony,
Yeah, yeah.
um, because it seems like the most gentle, merciful way to pop frames, to break frames that aren't working, poke fun at it, show a hole, right? And in a way that a humble person can then laugh at, right? That's the beauty of humility. Is if you know that you don't have it all right. Oh, there's their timer. If you know, if you're able to say, I know I don't see everything clearly. I know I have disordered desires, and I can be okay with that because I know the God to whom I belong, right? And you can walk in humility. Then you can allow this prophetic frame breaking, this poke, this teasing, to reorient your vision, um, without breaking you, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
kind of best case frame breaking is where we walk with enough humility to tease and poke each other back into um, an ability to see. However, we see like at scale, and I've had to learn to be careful with my girls because they tend to be more sensitive than I am by nature. Um, and to realize like, oh, it's not always, sometimes they need mom's sincerity to sit down with them and hug them and talk through something hard and not just always default to, satire or teasing, but then at scale, it can turn really toxic at scale because it just becomes, um, rather a way of wounding rather
Mm.
than that break and reframe. It just becomes a way of wounding one another, and it can turn dark on the cultural level. You think of the Babylon Bee, they've played a prophetic role,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like a really prophetic role. I mean, people joke about how like, oh, the bee prophesied this, using satire to try and break a frame, to try and point out, hey, this logic doesn't work, guys. This is where this logic goes. And I think they've had some success. Sometimes they've crossed the line and gone too far, right? And so that's one way I see the frame breaking playing out. How else do you see it?
I mean, I don't know. Like, humor, comedians, definitely. Um, Comedy, art.
Mm-hmm. Through
I,
storytelling, right? That can be a positive way that if I can, as an effective storyteller or artist, draw you into an experience of a different perspective, that's
mhm.
a way to reframe in a more positive, constructive way, for sure.
Well, and I just like, I think it's incredibly difficult to do that on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like my background is in, oh, I have a few different backgrounds. One of my backgrounds is in poetry. So I spent a lot of time in the back of bars performing poetry.
Oh, that's cool.
And it doesn't work well on the internet.
No, it doesn't.
I still do it. Um, but it's not the same thing as being in a room where you can feel the energy of a little crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And like I kind of think all of these frame breaking things are like meant to be embodied. I
Yeah.
don't know how well they like, it's like, oh hey, I'm getting to the point of the story, but then a notification appears, and like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of like breaks the whole, like it's lost. Whatever you were trying to do is now gone. Whereas like in a room, if you lose attention, you can regain the attention of a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then like lengthen, but like digitally, you can't feel any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me thinks that we have given up so much of our lives to the digital in general
Yeah.
that until we like really commit to re-embodying as a culture and get really intentional about creating third spaces for communities to do things, like I don't know that it's possible. And I don't mean that in a defeatist sense. Like the Anglican parish that I am a member at, like we're building a building that's intended to be a third space for community. We also intend to run a guild hall out of it and hopefully some homeschool stuff. So like we're like putting all our chips in. Um, but I don't know what else to do besides to say like get together in person and do things in person because we are persons, and I think the digital takes a lot from us, and it's so like, well, it's so cool because right now like I get to talk to you and you're far away and I would never be able to talk to you without the digital. So it's like it would be so easy for me to keep finding interesting people to talk to and to keep doing interview podcasts, but it's like, what am I not doing tonight that I could be doing? And then it's like, I at some point, if this is all I do, I need to sacrifice the really interesting or important potential podcast guest for like the group of in person, like just not strangers, but like just normal human beings. And I have a hard time not going for the shiny digital thing, if I'm honest.
I think that's really wise. I think you're spot on. And if this is the point that interested me most in my recent conversation with Pajot, is where we were talking about that pattern in alchemy, where the first stage is to break down the ore, and we're talking in the context of attention, and then the that's the black stage, and then the white stage purifies and consolidates. So if we think about this in terms of attention, every time we switch to something else, like you mentioned, the notification, or I scroll to, just to the next thing beneath the tweet on my screen, you're going through a dissolution and a refocusing process. And it is fragmenting our souls so deeply, into where we cannot. I loved how you said at the beginning of this conversation, well, there's a unity to a person, right? And if the medium, the technological liturgy we are living is a liturgy of this constant dissolving and refocusing, fragmentation, our ability to be a unity is going to be itself dissolved, right? And so in terms of, I think you're right that we have to, what your church is doing is exactly what we need to be doing and what we need churches and families everywhere to have the courage to do, because it takes courage, right? It takes risk. It's not highly profitable. It's not easy. And I think that is the temptation of the digital space, right? Again, if we think about the spirits, the powers, the principalities that rule over these digital spaces, it's efficiency, profit, and dopamine. And they draw us in, and then they break down our consciousness in order to feed off it for profit, for ego. Okay, is there no place for the digital space, right? Because like I have actually met so many wonderful people, and I think I see in the lives of all kinds of people and my local friends here, the way that the kind of the network of, we're in many ways reviving education and philosophy and wisdom
Yeah.
through the way this technology is enabling us to have these Socratic dialectical conversations to access information. But we have to keep it takes a lot of virtue to keep it rightly ordered, right? And so I mentioned this on the Pajot conversation, so I'm just coming off that, so I'm thinking about those things. But the phrase, let the good serve what's better and both serve the best,
Mm.
always trying to um, rightly order our hierarchy. So, and I think of this like the food pyramid, right? Like the bulk of my food, my life, my attention is here in incarnational space, because that really is where we encounter that which is most human, that which is most valuable, that which is most beautiful. And then our diet of digital attention, not, to be limited, but not only limited, but ordered toward feeding back into the human space, right? So, I mean, like a simple way I do this is, um, I would especially when we were at a bigger church, I would often just flip through Facebook on a Saturday looking for people who are at church, so that when I went to church, I had things to ask them so we could quickly get to like a good conversation. Oh, hey, I saw that your mom had a birthday. How's she doing? Or whatever. It's like a little way, right? But like, if I'm going to go there, how is going there going to feed back into my Eucharistic community? Um, or, we have a think, drink, and pray group, a small group here where we read together, and we'll often try, hey, I watched this podcast. If anyone wants to watch it, and then next time we get together, we'll incarnate that online conversation within our local space, right? So doing everything we can to whatever attention we feel like we give to the digital space, it has a way to hook back in, feed back into our incarnational spaces. I think being very intentional about that will go a long way toward rightly ordering the spaces, without having to be absolutist about using them or not using them at all.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like this is like the landing place of this is before you started saying it, you used the word disordered once, and it was like super shiny to me because like one way to describe like the food system today is that it's disordered right now, and many systems that we participate in are disordered, and it's like there is so much, I don't know, desire. It's almost like messianic energy, like waiting for the right government to arrive to set the nation in order.
Mm.
And I keep thinking about like, I get that the nation is a big deal, but like I can't set my nation in order, but I can have an enormous ordering influence on my local community.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I mean, sure, it's 20 years of work maybe to rightly
Yeah.
order a community, but I'm 34. I got a few like 20 set chunks in my life. I got at least two. I might have three. I could live till I'm 94. Like, if I commit to something for 20 years, that can go a really long way. And even in the sense of like, when I'm thinking about purchasing a home, it's like, I want to plant trees there. And I want like my children to like eat off of those trees, and we're not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to like upgrade homes. Like I'm going to put down roots in this home, and that allows me to plant trees and then like harvest those trees a decade later. But if I purchase the home expecting to like, well, in 10 years, then be able to like upgrade to the next house, then like you never form roots. And
Yeah.
that has been the story of my 20s and early 30s,
Mm.
was never forming roots. And it's kind of all my wife and I talk about is like, what does it mean to actually put down roots and like commit to a place, and then commit to the right ordering of that place and expand our little zone as much as we can and find other people who are rightly ordering, and then we work together for the right ordering of a city.
Yeah. Yeah. So beautiful. And I think we're all, I mean, I know I feel that deeply. This modern mobility is the power principality in which we were raised, right? Which, to your point that you've made a couple times, which is why when AI comes, we're so tempted to just receive it as, well, yeah, the next step, because I've already been fragmented in how I live I don't live in the town where I grew up. I don't live near any of my family. We move for the job. We're already moving for, it's already, again, capitalist, like I'm not a communist, guys. Um, but this principality has so much power. It has a disordered power. And so we've already been ordering our families' lives around the machine in terms of where we live and the jobs that we take and whether we are a two-income family or not in order to pay the bills. We're having to make decisions around mammon, the rule of mammon, rather than other values, which might allow, mom to be with the kids at home. Anyway, we've already been formed so much by that principality that when it comes to us in a new concentrated form online or in AI, we're ready for it. We're ready to welcome it as that which feels akin to how I've already been living, right?
Well, AI feels like the ordering of disorder.
Yes. Yeah, the savior. Like I totally think that was the appeal to me. I mean, as an intellectual, as an educator, as someone who loves to learn, you know, all the time, too many books to read, too much to read, too much information. How do I take in all this information? How do I AI, this powerful brain tool will consolidate it for me. It'll give me summaries of books. It will save me, right? And I genuinely consider spent a year playing around with it, considering it, and I'm not again saying it has no ability that way, but I mean there are problems with using it. As I posted on X today, actually, an article talking about, no, as a research tool, it's still not as good as you guys think. And what I've been thinking about this, Ethan, let me see if I can articulate it for you. Again, we feel caught in this prisoner's dilemma. That's not the spirit of the kingdom. Maybe it's my hubris. Maybe it's my lust for knowledge that is my problem. And that more data and more info and more books isn't actually the answer to my hungers. And what if maybe the truest, most humane form of knowledge isn't collecting data points? What if it is wisdom? And wisdom can be gained with any data set. Does that make sense? I've been feeling really challenged to reorder toward, okay, yes, you haven't read all the medieval books. You haven't read all of this topic. You can't be an expert on all the things. And maybe that's by God's design. Maybe this isn't a prisoner's dilemma you're supposed to turn toward your AI savior to solve. Maybe it's the recognition of the human limits that God gave you for his good purposes because you have a higher telos than just knowledge. And I think, to your point, a higher telos that requires presence, right? Incarnate presence. So you were talking about, again, like we've already traded these artificial things for realities. I've been thinking about this a lot because I started to notice the way that people in their speech, and again, pay attention to the way the language they use, the metaphors they use, that's the key to their world paradigm, right?
I'm feeling really fried today.
Yeah.
As if my brain is a computer chip that could be fried. Yeah.
I mean, I'll find myself being like, oh, I just need to download this information in this conversation or something like that, right? So I've noticed the way that people have made this ontological switch and that they really do think the artificial things are the more real things. For example, we were touring one of those old houses in Ireland, and I overheard these people say, oh my gosh, this house, it's just like the houses in the movie, right? Where the house in the movie is the thing that feels real to them. And then the actual historical house they're in feels like a copy of the movie.
Yeah.
Right? Or you'll be in a museum. No, I always get this backwards. I flip it. I'm out hiking in Colorado and you overhear people on the trail being like, oh my goodness, look at that mountain. It looks just like a painting, right? The painting, the image on my screen is the reality. And then the mountain actually out there is the copy of the picture. And my kids will now troll me on this because I'm like, I'll kind of like pay attention and I'll write it down. We'll talk about it. So we're out on a walk and my daughter, she was like, oh mom, that the full moon, they put the Pixar moon, or not the Pixar moon, I can't remember, the DreamWorks moon.
Yeah.
Someone put the DreamWorks moon up in the sky, mom, and she's just doing it to troll me. But we were in Scotland one time, driving along the coastline, and we see these circle things in the ocean, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, those are just like the fish hatcheries in city skylines." Because my kids, we spend so much time among artificial representations that those things now feel to us as primary reality.
Yeah.
And reality is this shadow or this copy. And I think that something fundamental, maybe you can articulate it because you've been articulating a lot of this really well. Something fundamental to our humanity is at stake. Because I think one of the primary ways our presence to God and each other is through the creation, through things that God himself, those primary realities, the trees, the sky, the ground, the dirt in my feet, the creatures he's made, that my personal visceral contact with those things is part of grounding myself properly in reality so that I can tell up from down. And we really are losing that in a way that something fundamental to our soul is being lost, though it's hard to articulate.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, so there's a spring near my house. It's about 10 minutes. It's called the Hygeia Spring. Do you know the word Hygeia?
No.
It's a Greek goddess. It's one of
Connected to hygiene, yeah?
Yeah. In like the 1880 World Fair, they pumped the water from this spring down to Chicago, and it was declared like the second best water in the world besides Germany. And this water's insane. I mean, like, it sounds stupid to be like, oh, we drive to the spring, and now we have these glass jugs, and it's on my wife's way home from work, also my dad's way home from work, and we take turns filling up giant jugs of water to drink spring water. And you go like, that's like a silly like health nut thing. You go, well, like, here's the thing. Like, there's like minerals in the water. And like the spring is like really like deep down. And so it has like contact with minerals. And like those minerals were like put there by a creator so that water would be rich with minerals and it would be alive. And we don't drink living water anymore. The water we drink is processed and it's split into parts, and some parts are taken out and then other parts are added in, even though there are springs. Like, it is possible to partner with the springs and create water technology like in alignment with the springs. Mm-hmm. But we don't think we need that. We think we can just mineralize the water afterwards. In the same way we think that like in office buildings, we can put light bulbs that are artificial and that spectrum won't affect us. But like, we've been created for certain patterns of light to do certain things to us. And we're disconnected ourselves from like real living light. And we have like dead light. And basically like most of our food is dead. And this started around like 1950 because we wanted everything to be shelf stable. And I'm not even saying that was a bad thing to do, but the food is dead because if it was alive, it would rot. And the food in the grocery store doesn't rot. And like the things that we drink, I recently learned how to like make ginger bug, which is like old soda making technique. And it's like sourdough starter, but like for liquid. And it's just ginger and honey. It's pretty easy. But like if I went on vacation on a cruise or something, I'd have to find somebody to watch my sourdough starter and my ginger bug because they're alive. And so we just kind of took all these like living creation and we created artificial dead things, and that's what's all around us. Like we live among the dead and we think it's alive. And if I talk too much about this, it's going to sound like I'm being judgmental, and I'm not trying to like judge anybody. I just really care about like eating and drinking life, and like I want everyone to experience living water, and insert the Jesus riff like
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean that's where the sacramental vision um helps us see, like God made the water and the bread to embody, to be informed by qualities that would allow us to perceive the meaning of spiritual truth. He made water to be a certain way, for there to be living water. He made bread and yeast to work a certain way so that he could come and make it a metaphor for his own body and his own kingdom, right? And when we lose touch with those created realities, we lose touch with the metaphors, with the sacramental symbolic metaphors that were put there so we would understand who we are, who God is, what we're made for, how to live, right? And I think you put that so beautifully, this living water, this living food that has all these subtle qualities. Again, we rushed ahead in kind of this prisoner's dilemma. Well, we got to take control of the food supply. We got to take control of the water supply in order to control, right, to control our ability to build our cities. And I'd have to think a little bit more about exactly the history of water supply. But so often it's in the name of well, we've got to build, we've got to end hunger, we've got to, so we rush ahead
yeah
dealing with things we don't fully understand, right? And then to this AI topic, again, well, if if the human person, I mean, and then we have all these diseases. We all have cancer, we all have Alzheimer's, we all have heart disease, we all have autoimmune diseases. We don't know why. Maybe it's because what's the word I'm looking for? We have encrusted ourselves in a dead world.
yeah
And then our bodies are trying to reflect that back to us. Um, all the more than, with AI, it's a kind of dead intelligence. So if it's bad to give your kids dead water and dead food, how much more destructive is it to give them a dead intelligence, something that mimics relationship without having the substance of relationship, the substance of wisdom and intelligence, in all of those subtle ways that really do make a difference for our wholeness, and our flourishing.
yeah Okay, I'm gonna ask the final question.
Okay.
So this is going to be titled, and this is part of a series, but this will be titled Annie and the Quest for the Holy Techne. And the
I love
final
it. What a
the
great title.
final question is, have we found anything holy in the last 1 hour, 23 minutes and 30 seconds?
Man, the quest for the holy techne, that is a potent phrase that I'm going to spend time meditating on. Ethan, to find it, we're going to have to ask the right question, right?
Well, that's my job. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get good at asking the right questions, and this might be, I don't know, maybe number, well, January. No, maybe, I think it started February. I don't know, maybe 15 or so. So I've
So
had
have
a
we,
number of hours of conversation, and then I ask everyone at the end, did we find anything holy? And some people go like, well, what do you mean by holy? What do you mean by techne? You're not going to ask me those questions because you're a student of words. Um, but yeah, like I had two of my like, real life friends, non-internet people, and one of my friends was like, no, we didn't find anything holy at all. which is hilarious because only a real friend would like just deny the question completely. Um, yeah, this is the quest for the holy Techne. Did we find anything holy?
Mm. I love when you've said, "Oh, it was shiny," because I think that's, as I was talking about, the nous, the experience of seeing, and the way that even knowledge itself is a holy act, right? The communion of my spirit with the logos. I mean, that's what real knowledge is, this sacred space. Um, yeah, I feel that that several of the things you have said have been shiny and edifying to my spirit. However, like at this moment, like my brain is a little fatigued in terms of remembering what it is. I'm going to have to, like, as I go and get ready for bed, I'm going to be meditating on the things that we've said and be percolating on them. I mean, what you said about living water, what you said about what your community is doing in terms of building a third space and creating actual incarnate space for people to be together in purposeful ways. That's a holy thing. That's a sacred thing. And in terms of this quest for a holy Techne, I think about this a lot, often in reference to Tolkien, right? The difference between the Techne of the orcs and the Techne of the elves. And recently I've been thinking about it in terms of Lewis, because when he takes us in Out of the Silent Planet, which you're going to read real soon, so look for this when you read it, you'll love it. He takes us to Mars, which he imagines as an unfallen planet, a planet where there was no fall, where the people who live there are not yet stained by sin. And it's got a little Avatar vibe, right? Like they're a little more primitive, but what the main character realizes is that's his bias. His fallen bias is that, well, if you could, you would. And what he discovers is that they actually have very sophisticated knowledge and technical capacities. They can make things that he wonders at, but they don't always choose to do it because their society is ordered toward a higher value, toward relationship, towards connection with the land, towards poetry. And so they don't always make the tools that they can make. They choose what to make and what not to make, based off a different set of values. And I think that is a kind of moment I really wonder, and maybe I'm completely wrong and naive, but Marshall McLuhan has this idea of a reversal, that when you introduce a new technology, it extends a human capacity. It gives you a greater capacity. So Zoom right here, it extends my capacity to talk to you across space. But when you overuse that technology, when you overuse it, it reverses on you. It will actually take away, like the costs will become higher than the gains. It will diminish your life. And I think we're at a space, I wonder if we're at a deflection point with technology itself, where every new technology we're building, the costs are higher than the gains, right? For a long time, the gains were maybe outweighed the cost. But we've so layered ourselves, so encrusted ourselves in technology that we've reached that flipping point where now each new technology costs us more than it gains. And that the challenge before us is to intentionally choose less, which is, again, kind of what you're talking about with your community. We could do church, this is like I wonder if the pandemic is kind of this point. Well, we could do church online. Everyone's like, hell no, this is awful. We have to find a way to reconnect ourselves and submit our technology to our incarnational life, to again make the machine serve us, whereas right now we are serving the machine. And that, I think, is that quest for a holy technology, a technology that again is properly ordered with the meaning of the world. And I wonder, I'll wrap it up with this, because we were talking about having the right paradigm, the right template, the right category. And modernity, we could say, is maybe characterized by the metaphor of the machine, of thinking about the world through that paradigm. If we can move to the paradigm of art, to see the world as God's artwork, and then our lives as playing our role in his great epic, in his great comedy, if we can if we can think about the world through the paradigm of poetry and art, I think that lens will help us more truly see the world as it is, ourselves as we were created to be, and then begin to order our lives in more humane ways that recover our flourishing. You know, as sinners, only but by the grace of God. But I do think that switch from a machine to a poetry paradigm could provide a lot of fruitfulness for those who want, for those who are ready to see.